Stories that Matter. The journey of life from birth to death is an extraordinary trip, sometimes filled with great joy and excitement, but at other times filled with pain, sorrow, and disappointment. Stories That Matter shares both extremes with you. Sometimes our stories will make you feel very happy, but the journey of life is not all happiness. Other times, the journey of life will make you feel sad, for all of us have experienced both extremes. Stories That Matter will begin right after the break with a story that will touch your heart in the journey of life.
Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Todd Braschler from Branson, Missouri.
Yes, sir.
And thank you so much for coming in from Branson to be here with us. Long trip, and you have been so busy. Why don't you share some of your ministry, or if you want to share some of your background about your involvement in Branson with your family, if you want to start there,
sure.
Or if you want to start with the ministry. I don't care, because both of them are fantastic.
Well, they're all kind of intertwined. I was raised in a pastor's home to begin with, and so growing up, my dad was our pastor there in St. James, Missouri, and Tampa, Florida, and Anderson, Indiana. We ended up in St. James, Missouri, and our family sang as a group. I've been doing family concerts since I was a little kid with my sister.
The church?
Yeah, at our church. My parents and my siblings, 4 of us, and we've always been a very musical family. But you know, it's just for our church. It's no big deal. And then we formed a quartet in our church. My dad, myself, and my worship pastor and a cousin. And we just began singing at church quite often, and some of the local festivities there in St. James, Missouri. Next thing I know, I'm off to college, and my younger brother steps into my role on the quartet. And I'm my sophomore year, my dad calls and says, "Hey, I've got some good news and some not so good news." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, the good news is we're going to go to Lake of the Ozarks and make an album, and we've been offered to open in a theater in Branson." I said, "Well, Dad, you don't even read music. What are you doing going in the music business?" And he said, "Well, we've just got this opportunity." He said, "I've been a pastor for 30 years. I just like to give this a year and take a break. I've never had a sabbatical or anything, and we just feel like this might be a unique way to do ministry."
Was this a dream that your dad had?
None
Whatsoever. None for any of you?
No, we were just a singing family in our church. We have no grand thoughts of performing or anything like this. It's just part of our ministry at our church.
Well, when you went off to college then, Todd, when you went off to college, did you follow that career of the music initially?
I did. I still am today. I've majored in voice performance and sang in a number of groups there in the school, not only choral groups, but also individual singing groups. And then I did a lot of solo and duet kind of opportunities in churches. And so, yeah, music has always been a pretty big part of my life.
Where'd you go to college at?
I went to Anderson University, where Bill Gaither attended, and Sandy Patty, and then one of my roommates was Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Sure.
And so there's been a number of people who have really made a name for themselves and for the Lord in music ministry. And so I had a lot of good influence and training in those days.
Well, I would say the Lord certainly directed you in that area, didn't he? Because the roommate you had, the school that you went to, your singing in the church, fond memories from it, no doubt. Very much,
and especially with my family. And so when they started the show, I was actually a worship pastor in a church after graduation. And so in 1983, they came and began the Braschler Music Show in Branson with my family. And I joined them 2.5 years later and was there full time when Branson had 16 shows, I think, at the time. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce came to my father and said, "Mr. Braschler, I just don't think you should come to Branson. There's too much music here now. We don't know if the town will support it." And there were 16 shows.
Is that right?
And now there's over 170 shows, so it's changed a little since then.
So when your dad said, "I'm going to take this year off from being the pastor at a church, and we're going to do this music," where did you guys wind up? Obviously in Branson, but what theater?
We were clear out on Indian Point. The Lowe's sisters had just vacated a theater out on Indian Point on the west side of Branson, and had moved into town, and so we took over their theater for just a year or two, and it was not a good location. It was far enough away. It was just right next to Silver Dollar City, but people usually just came to Silver Dollar City and turned around and went back to Branson. And so that was a pretty challenging season right there.
In retrospect, did that turn out well to give you kind of a chance to get your feet planted and say, okay, this is what the entertainment business looks like?
You bet.
And that may have been better than opening to Full House and people,
Yeah, they don't have it together yet.
Yeah.
Seriously, because we had been pastor's family all of our life. We didn't know anything different, and now we're entertainers and, in the public eye, and it was a whole nother world. Yeah.
And then did you move on to the Strip?
We did. We found a theater open on Gretna Road, right down off of 65 there in Branson, not 65, 165. And so we were there for a number of years until a guy came and built us a theater up on Shepherd of the Hills Expressway about 4 doors down from Shoji Tabuchi.
Oh, yeah.
And so the Braschler music show really found its place there at this Victorian-styled theater there on Shepherd of the Hills Expressway.
Yeah, that's exciting. We got to cut away and take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my guest, Todd Braschler. And Todd is in from Branson. We're filming this right now today at the Auto Racing Museum in Chapman. And we're talking about your family got involved in the entertainment business out in Branson. Yes. And you just, when we cut away for break, we were talking about the fact you moved to Shepherd of the Hills area, that general area. How many years was your family in Branson performing?
Yeah, we came there in 1983, and we were there until 2007. Would still be there. My father, when he turned 70, his hearing became a real challenge, and that's when he decided, I just can't keep the quality. He was the high tenor of the quartet, and so about 24 years actually as we were in Branson as a show.
Okay, and then from there, after he said, I can't continue to do it, did the family band just sort of break up from there?
No, they stayed together for a couple of years. My sister and her husband took over the leadership of the show and probably lasted for another 2 years. But if you remember about 2008 when the stock market really took a plunge, Branson survives on discretionary income. And boy, it just began to really be tough to fill a theater during those years. And that just kind of gave us the finish line, in terms of being able to hang in there. That's too when a lot of the timeshares began opening up in Branson, and so the culture of the town really began to change. And I think we had run our course and we're ready to move on to a new season.
Certainly, by being in Branson at the time that you were with the founding people of country western music that was performing at the Branson area then.
You better believe it. If it wasn't for the Foggy River Boys and the Presleys and the Bald Knobbers, I mean, these were a Cheeside Childs up at the Starlight Theater. These were other shows that we were discussing earlier with your brother when Branson shows were for each other, and we were helping each other. Clay Cooper and others were just coming to town right after we started there, and Shoji Tabuchi and others. And these were the days where a theater, if you had a bus breakdown or a sound equipment not malfunctioning, all you had to do was call another show and they'd come over and help you, or you help them, either way. I'm not sure it's always been that way, but in those days, if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure we would have survived.
We have some family condos at Point Royale, so we've been down there a few times. I haven't been down there nearly as much as my brother gets there, and my sister lives there. But the times I've been down there, I have seen the show, the talent on air may say, in the audience with us tonight is, and then they will introduce somebody who's performing at another theater in the personal stand, and they go right on through and say, you can get tickets over there, that show's fantastic, and that really shows the camaraderie between the entertainers.
You bet, and I really appreciated the fact of getting to know a lot of these people personally. It wasn't, like you're saying, it wasn't us and them, but we were all together. We did a lot of community kind of things together, and fundraisers, and also some very, very quality people have come through town over the years.
Well, I would agree with you there. I'm assuming that there was, when you socialized, family picnics, church activities, and those things, that it's the same people that were performers, and naturally that's who you sort of gravitated to because you had a lot of in common with them.
You sure did. And you were, even on the road during the travel season, you were each doing the same venue in different years, and so you got to know one another and speak well of one another, you know, on the road. And so it just created a brotherhood in that community that was easy to do with 16 to 20 shows, and now with 170 or whatever the total is now, quite a bit more challenging.
I'm sure that these contacts that you made in those early years have continued, and you have lifelong friends that were in the entertainment business that you're still close friends with.
Very much, very much. Some of them have passed on since then. Boxcar Willie, believe it or not, was one of the finest men we ever met there, and my father was privileged to do his funeral. He was one of the more of the national stars that came into Branson that was just a down-to-earth, good person, you know. I remember at an award show one time at the Presleys, they said, you guys are going to have dressing room 5 and you're going to be sharing it with some other performers. And so I was the first one up the stairs at the Presleys Theater, and I knocked on the door and I heard, "Come in." And I opened the door, and here's Boxcar Willie standing in his boxer shorts. Hey guys, come on in. You know, he was just a everyday kind of guy that had a gig, and yeah, very, very fine man. Yeah.
Awesome. Did your family, the rest of your siblings, did they stay in the music business, or did all just move to what we would call normal lives?
Yeah, they stayed in the music area, but we were never really in the music business, to be honest with you. If you were to talk to our fans over those 24 years, their connection to the Braschlers was not necessarily just our music. You know, with our father being a pastor, and now 2 or 3 of us, all of our kids are all involved in ministry, it was always a ministry. It was always caring for people, and it was investing in people and getting to know them and being genuine and honest and open with people. So, you know, my mom worked in the box office, and it would be not a stretch at all to say if it wasn't for her, we'd have never lasted in Branson because of her love for people.
Sure.
And so my brother, after the show had completed, I went back into ministry. One of my younger brothers is a worship pastor at a church in Harrison, Arkansas. So we all stayed involved in ministry and in music together still.
Well, as we talk about the ministry, your own ministry now, after the family, and they certainly didn't break up, it was just a matter of, well, this has ran its course, and so let's do what we really do. And that falls back upon your parents' training of being in the Lord's work.
That's right.
And so what did you do?
I went further on into worship ministry. I left and went to West Palm Beach, Florida, and Kentucky, and Casper, Wyoming, before landing finally in Wichita, Kansas, as a worship pastor mainly, and then into teaching and training a pastor, connecting new people to our church and all the while being involved in music and somehow. Until 2001, when the occurrence in New York City happened, I was living in Wichita, and the aeronautics industry was devastated, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And so I was told that my position on staff where I was attending was going to be coming to an end. I thought, Lord, I don't feel like I'm supposed to move. I want my kids to grow up with childhood friends, which I never got to do. So we stayed in Wichita, and I began Todd Braschler Ministries in 2001, a tax-exempt nonprofit. And it began first as a concert artist. I went to Nashville and began my recording career, but soon my passion took over, and that opened the doors to a whole lot more than just music.
All right. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. We're visiting with Todd Braschler. If you've missed the first part of the show, you'll be able to catch one of the rebroadcasts, or you'll be able to go to our website. That information will be up on the screen. Matter of fact, if you want to contact Todd or follow anything with his ministry, that information is on the screen right now, and it will be on at different times as we go through. Todd, when we cut away for break, you were telling me about you started your own ministry. You wanted to stay in the Wichita area to raise your kids. And you went off to Nashville, did some recording, but the Lord was tugging at your heart and say, Todd, I want you to do something a little bit different. What did you feel like the Lord was telling you?
Yeah, this began when I was on staff as a worship pastor in Casper, Wyoming, when somebody came and said, what are your spiritual gifts and what is your passion? What's the burden that God has given you? I thought, I don't have any idea. I've never been asked that question before. And the next thing I know, as I was being challenged in how to put this into words, it was really the development of people. It was trying to excavate God's vision and His calling in the life of a person, a leader, a man, and so forth. That led me into speaking for men's conferences and for couples retreats, especially in the area of leading my life and my family with God's vision. And very often I've heard vision articulated as a sentence or a paragraph. But by the very definition, shouldn't that be something I can see? If it's vision, how do I see it? And Ephesians 1:18 is a passage that's become a core scripture in my ministry. Paul is praying over the church and he says, I pray that the eyes of your heart, your soul, would be enlightened, that you would see and you would know the hope you've been called to. And I translate that into the man you've been called to, the couple that you've been called to, the people that you've been called to minister to. If God had His way through you, what would your kids be like? Or what would the people in your ministry or in your business, what would be the result in their life if God had His way with you? So that resulted in men's conferences, couples retreats, leadership events, and then I work one-on-one with men and with leaders excavating this same challenge. So,
okay. Are you traveling lots of locations to do these retreats?
Oh, all over the country, to Zambia, Africa, to Honduras, wherever there are leaders who are saying, I know God has a call in my life. I know I'm supposed to be involved in something bigger than me. I just don't know how to figure it out.
Well, Todd, when we came back out of break and we'd been talking about the music, you were excited about the music and what your family did and all those things. The minute we shift gears about what the Lord's used your skills for, your voice went higher and stronger, and you obviously have a passion for it.
Very much.
And one of the events that you do is Fight Like a Man. Tell me about how you developed that concept and how you use it.
Well, being a father of 3 boys, one of our greatest challenges as parents was channeling their energy. They have a lot of energy. How do I channel their efforts and their energy in a place that would be successful and productive in their life? And I find that as a believer and as a leader and as a man, one of the greatest challenges I have is making sure that my best efforts are being invested in the greatest way. And so Fight Like a Man came out of realizing that there are really 4 major areas I must be pouring my life into: God's purpose, God's power, God's priority for my life, and His passion for the use of my life. And that's where this event came out of, those 4 challenges.
And if a church organization or a group or an individual says, I want to first be able to attend one of these, or they may say, I want to host one of these, will they get that information off your website?
Off my website. You also have my personal cell number and my email right there on the website as well. There are audio clips and video clips available on the website, as well as some testimonials of others who've participated.
Sure. And we first met when you did the Fight Like a Man event at Abilene at Emmanuel Church with your good friend Gordon McClure. He's
Yes,
a pastor there. And it was a fantastic event. I attended it, and I'm an old guy now, so my kids are all growing, and now I'm in the grandfather situation. But it's fun to watch and see how the kids are doing, and to see how, I've always thought, well, I can see what kind of a parent I am once I see how my kids are as parents too. Mm-hmm. And that Fight Like a Man event in Abilene was absolutely fantastic. There was probably 80, 90 people who attended there, and it was so powerful. And like most times men come in and they're extremely guarded at the beginning. Yep,
Arms
arms
crossed,
crossed,
yeah.
folded, pretty stiff. I'm good, nothing wrong here. And as time went on, when we got down to the end of that event, why, there was tears that were running, and I had the pleasure of being one of those who was up to receive people that came up, and we prayed with them, and it was absolutely fantastic, because I'm also a judge, and so many of those people that not many, but a few of those people that I saw, I had seen in other settings, and they were so thankful for the Fight Like a Man, and they were so determined to come back and go back and make a positive difference by starting with themselves and then sharing what they knew that they had that obligation. That's why they were there, and the way you handled that program was just absolutely fantastic.
I was so blessed by that, because there were some guys there. I think there's an impression out there that if you're going to come to a men's retreat, you must be damaged, or you must be desperate or in trouble. And I was so excited to see pastors and ministry leaders and cowboys and military men who are strong leaders, and they're used to being very, very independent, come to an experience like this, and God began to work and move in their soul, and the response, I'm telling you, it shocked me at the openness of these men to channel their energies in a way that would be God-honoring and would make the greatest difference. I've always been a person, maybe like you, that I want to make the greatest investment for the greatest return, whatever that is, relationships, endeavors, and wow, to see these men pour themselves into this teaching and to see how God began to encourage them, that was such a blessing. I still am very reeling from that experience.
Well, and you've done lots of the Fight Like a Man programs, haven't you?
Over 500.
And similar results most of the time, probably.
You better believe it.
Yeah,
You better. Yeah, God's really been challenging me and these men.
I see some of the men who were there, and now I see them, and we'll occasionally talk about some of that. What an inspirational event, and thank you for doing that. We've got to cut away, take a break. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, visiting with Todd Braschler, and we were talking about the events Fight Like a Man. I suspect, having done over 500 of these, that you have a favorite story or a multiple stories that you could share with the viewers about somebody who was in one of the events and something changed their lives. Something you want to? Is there anything you want to share?
You bet. There's one in particular. I usually don't hear these stories till after the fact, but this was a soldier who wrote me after the conference was over and said, all my life I've been in the military, my adult life, and I've been taught to fight a certain way. But he said, the way that it was presented this time, and especially the logo as a man that's kneeling in a humble state, is so contrary to what I've been taught. And he said, I'm learning what it means to fight for my own life in a way that God designed. And it was so touching. You can read his story on my website. What a tremendous young man, and many that I've heard from that have been realigned in their walk with God and their own identity. Man, that's why I do this. It's such a blessing in return.
Todd, thank you for being here. Good luck with it, and we're gonna follow you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Thanks for watching Stories That Matter. See you next time.